In this section, we'll be masking the stingray out of the background and attach a banner to its tail. We'll learn how to use the pen tool, how to rotoscope footage, how to track movements, and finally, how to attach one bit of footage to another. In this video, we'll learn how to use the pen tool to make shapes, which is an essential skill in any drawing program. For this exercise, I've created a separate project for you to practice with, but don't forget to save your other project. We'll be going back to it momentarily. In your exercise file, choose File, Open Project, and choose the shapes.aep file. We'll be using this as a template to learn how to use the pen tool. The pen tool, located in the upper tool area, can make two types of points. It can make corner and curve points. Let's start by making a square with corner points. Simply click the corners, and you'll begin to draw a shape. You'll notice when you come back to the very first point, you'll see a circle indicator next to your pen tool. That means you'll be closing the shape when you click. Next, let's try a circle. To create a curve point, you click with your mouse, hold your button down, and drag out the handles. I'll do that on the right, at the bottom, on the left. If I come back to the first point, I see the circle, and if I do a single click, it'll close the shape for me. Now let's try something a little harder. If you click on the pen tool and hold your mouse button, you'll see that there are some additional options for the pen tool. There's the Add Vertex tool or Add Point tool, and you can use that to add points. Points can be moved with the arrow tool, and if you want to delete a point, you can use the Delete Vertex tool. Finally, there's the Convert Vertex tool, and you can use this tool to change a corner point to a curve point, or to change a curve point back to a corner point. Now, let's try something a little harder. We'll switch back to the pen tool and click on the points like we did before. When you get to the third point, you can drag it out. Notice the handle is broken here, so we'll need to change the direction of the top handle. We can use the space bar to get our hand tool and move the handle into view. If you use your Option key or Alt on the PC, you'll see that it turns your cursor into the Convert Vertex tool. By clicking on the handle, you can move it to the proper place on the template. I'll continue making the rest of my shapes. If you can't see behind the shape, you can open up the shape layer and transform and set the opacity to 0. I'll click back on the last point that I created and then continue with my shape. Coming back to the beginning, I'll do a single click when I see the circle indicator. Again, I'll hold down the Option key and bring the handle back in. Now I can bring my opacity all the way back up. In the next video, we'll use this skill to clip the stingray out of its background. In this video, we'll use the pen tool to create a mask. Back in our After Effects project and in the main composition, we'll make sure that the ray's composition is on top of the background. To cut the ray out of its background, we'll use the pen tool to create a mask. This is called rotoscoping. This can take a lot of time and is just one way to cut an object out of its footage. With a little practice and some tips though, you can get through footage like this in about an hour. Let's double-click on our ray's composition to get inside of it. The first tip is to get to a point in the footage where the stingray is fully exposed at about 3 seconds and 17 frames. We do this because we want to get as many points on the outline as we'll need so that we don't have to add points later on. Another tip is that you can mask with multiple shapes. It doesn't have to be one shape. So in this example, I'll do the body separate from the wings and the tail. Let's start with the body. With the layer selected, I can click around the ray and it'll make a mask. Here, I'll do a click and drag to make a corner around its eye. Now that we've clipped out the body, we can no longer see the rest of the footage. If you switch over to your arrow tool and double-click on the footage, that'll take you into a footage view where you can use these toggles to change to different view modes. I'm going to use the second one to the left. Let's add another mask to the ray footage to the wings using the pen tool. I'll click around the wing, and if I overlap the body, like so, you'll see when I turn off my toggle, I have both the wing and the body as part of one mask. As you do this, you may want to zoom in on the footage, and again, I'll use Command or Control on the PC, and with the layer selected, I'll use Command or Control plus or minus to zoom in. If you need to move around the footage, you can hold your spacebar to get the hand tool. I'll click to start another mask, and finally I'll do the tail. And finally, I'll create another mask for the tail. And now when we toggle off, our stingray is fully masked. In the next video, we'll keep going and do this on multiple frames. In this video, we'll keep going with our mask and mask multiple frames. It's good to practice with the pen tool. It's something you'll see a lot in most Adobe products. However, if you're short on time, you can import the project that has the stingray already rotoscoped for you. To do that, choose File, Import File, and choose the stingray.aep project in your Chapter 3 folder. I'm going to hit Cancel because I'm going to show you how to rotoscope by hand. Rather than hand rotoscoping, you can use the Adobe Effects Mocha plugin. This plugin works really well when there's a lot of contrast. However, this footage has very low contrast, and Mocha AE can't quite follow it. We'll be looking at the Mocha plugin for tracking in the next video. To start, we need to animate our mask. We'll do that by opening up the raise footage and toggling open the mask option. For each mask, we want to click on the stopwatch next to the mask path to turn on the animation. The best way to rotoscope is to keyframe sections of your footage and then move the shape into place. We'll do that by going to the beginning of our footage and moving our mask. However, notice as soon as you move the footage, you can no longer see the stingray and it would be difficult to mask. To solve this problem, double-click on the footage and this will bring you to the footage preview. The footage preview has 3 toggles. The first one will show you just the mask, the second option shows you the footage and the mask, and the third option shows you the mask and the footage with a red overlay. I'm going to choose the second option. For the keyframe at the beginning of the footage, I want to select all 4 masks, and I can do that by holding down my Shift key as I select the first and last mask. And then with my Move tool, I can move the mask off screen. This automatically moves the mask. I'll move to the end of my footage where the stingray goes off screen and do the same. Now that we have a couple of sections, I'll go in between the first section and move my mask into place. Now's a good time to reshape the mask. I'm going to zoom in with the Control or Command plus and click off to deselect the masks. To select a mask, you can double-click on it, which will give you a bounding box, which will allow you to resize the mask and rotate it. By hitting Enter, you'll go back to your single points and can move them around the shape. I'll adjust each one of these so that it properly masks the stingray. Next, I'll move in between my middle and my last frame and adjust that mask. This will take a while, so I'll fast forward through this section and see you on the other side. In the next video, we'll look at tracking the movement of our footage. In this video, we'll be working with the Mocha After Effects plugin. Now that we have our stingray masked, We're going to use it for a banner to announce when our comic book is coming out. To do that, we'll need tracking. Tracking is a pretty simple process where we track the movement of our footage. Once we have that tracked, we'll attach another asset to it. The first thing we want to do is come back to our main composition and create the text that we're going to attach to our stingray. You can do that by either using the text tool and clicking to create a text layer, or by choosing Layer, New, Text. If that becomes unselected, just double-click to reactivate it. With it selected, we'll type in the text we're going to use, which is coming to a store near you in 2020. For this text, I'm using Impact, but you can use whichever font you'd like. I'm going to set the font size to 80, and the leading, or space between the lines, should be set to auto. Additionally, the tracking, which is the space between the letters, should be set to 0. If you don't know where your character panel is, you can always come to your window menu and choose Character. Next, let's add an effect to the stingray composition. Choose Effect, Boris Effects Mocha, Mocha AECC. By adding this effect, you'll add a button to the left-hand side in your effects controls. Click on that button to open the Mocha interface. Note, you may need to click through a few intro screens if this is the first time you're opening the effect. We'll be using the Essentials interface for this lesson. The Essentials interface consists of 3 areas: the layers where we create our tracking data, the track motion and track buttons for tracking, and the surface area, which defines the area we'll be adding our text to. Additionally, it has a preview window just like After Effects. To track the stingray, we're going to move to the middle of the footage and create a spline around the stingray's body. The spline will define the area we want to track. Now, if you click on the Show Surface or Tracking Data, it'll add a square to that. The square represents the area where our text is going to sit. So I'm going to click on the corners and shape it to about the shape of our text. Since we're starting in the middle of our footage, we're going to have to track forwards and backwards. Press the forward button in the track section and sit back and watch the plugin do its magic. If you get the tracking terminated prematurely, that just means it went off the screen. Click OK and we'll fix that later. Now that we've tracked forward, let's track backwards. Once the tracking's done, go ahead and close the file. Make sure you save it. And in the next video, we'll see how we can attach our text to the stingray tracking data. In this video, we'll attach an asset to our tracked footage. Back in After Effects, we need to generate the tracking data. In the Effects Control panel, open up the Tracking Data option. Choose Create Track Data and select the layer we just created. Selecting it entails clicking on the cog to the left of the layer name. Hit OK. Next, we want to select the layer we want to attach to our stingray. I'm going to choose the Coming to a Store Near You. And finally, we'll apply the export. This may make your text a little bit small, so click on your text, open up the options and the transform, and scale it a bit. Now when we scrub through, you'll see that the text stays on the stingray's belly. In this section, we learned how to create shapes with the pen tool, used shapes to mask footage. We animated masks and did some rotoscoping. We tracked footage, and then we applied assets to the tracking. In the next section, we'll look at text and 3D effects. In this section, we'll be working with text and adding 3D assets with Cinema 4D Lite. In this lesson, we'll learn how to add text, work with Cinema 4D Lite. We'll look at Cineware layers and 3D channel effects. In this video, we'll learn how to add more text to our project and add some effects. So this section will mainly focus on 3D text in Cinema 4D Lite. But while we're here, I wanted to show you how to add some fun effects to regular text. We'll add a text layer by making sure the main composition is selected and choosing Layer, New Text. The text we want is by Jessica Hickman. Jessica is the creator of all the artwork we're going to be using in the animation section. If you want to see more of Jessica's work, you can find her at jessicahickman.com. To animate the text, I'm going to select it with the arrow tool, move it down just a little bit, and I'll toggle open the text layer. You'll see to the right I have an Animate button, and I'm going to choose to animate the opacity. If you toggle open the Range selector, you'll see that it has a start and an end. I'm going to animate the start by making it 100 and bringing it back to the beginning of the timeline and setting the start to 0. I'll also change the opacity down to 0. And as I play through it, you'll see that the text animates on from left to right, or from the start to the end. I'm going to remove that and add a preset to our text. I'm going back to my Effects and Presets panel, and I'm going to open up the Animation presets. Inside of Presets, you'll find a text folder, and the animation that I want is under Organic. You'll see the second to the top is Boiling, and I'm going to drag that on top of the text we just created. If I play through this, you'll see that the text boils on and then boils off. I want to stop the text from going off screen and have it be static. To do that, I'll select the Layer panel and type the letter U. That'll reveal every option that is animated. I'll bring my cursor back here to where it starts to boil off, and I'll select these keyframes and delete them. You'll see that the text continues to wiggle. To fix that, I'm going to close the text layer, open it again, so I can see my animators. And you'll see the animator wiggle, position, and rotation. I'll bring my cursor back to where the bubble rise stops, and I'll set a keyframe for the position. At the very beginning of the timeline, I want it to be 3 and 5, so I'll set a keyframe. And then when the text is completely on, I'll set everything to 0. Let's see what this looks like. As I play through it, you'll see that the text boils on and then continues to jiggle after the 2-second mark. Let's fix that. I'll toggle close the text layer and toggle it open again so I can see my animations. And I'll move my cursor to where the text is fully on. I want to open up the Animator Wiggle Position Rotation and add a keyframe for both position and rotation. Let's bring the CTI back to the very beginning and set keyframes for both rotation and position. Going back to the end of the animation, I want to set everything to 0. And now when we play through this, it boils on and then just waves in the water, which is what I want. In the next video, we'll take a look at working with Cinema 4D Lite. In this video, we'll add a 3D asset using the Cinema 4D Lite software. Note, this software is not a standalone application and is only available through After Effects. There are 2 ways to get into Cinema 4D Lite. You can either choose File, New, and choose Max on Cinema 4D File, or with the main composition selected, you can choose Layer, New, and Max on Cinema 4D File. They both create a Cinema 4D file, as you can see, and will connect your project with Cineware. I'm going to call this file title, and save it in my O4 Text 3D folder. You'll see this adds a Cinema 4D layer to your Layers panel, with Cineware effect up in the Effects control, and you'll see the baseline for your 3D asset. Additionally, this will open up the Cinema 4D software. If this is the first time opening it, you may have to click through some windows. Let's first take a look at the interface. You have transform tools here, which have a selector, a move, a scale, and a rotate. This is your current tool selected. Then you have axes, which I'll show you in just a moment. These are the rendering tools, and these are the object creation tools. You have object, spline tools, generators, modeling tools, and deform tools. You also have some cameras and lights over here. For this exercise, we're going to add some custom artwork for our text, but let's first practice by adding a text object here in Cinema 4D. Go to the spline objects, click and hold, and choose text. Now this looks very similar to After Effects, but it's a little bit different. With that text selected, you need to go to the Object Properties and change the text here. So I'll change it to hello. If you click out of the box, it should update. Now notice this is just an empty spline. There is no surface to this. To create a surface, we simply go to the modeling objects and choose an extrude object. To extrude the text, we drop the text into the extrude object. And now we have surface to our hello text. If you save this and go back to After Effects, you'll see that the text shows up. Back in Cinema 4D Lite, let's take a look at the preview window. The preview window has some tools in the upper right-hand corner. The first one is the pan tool. If you click and hold your mouse and drag over that tool, you'll see that you can pan through the environment. If you click and hold and drag on the zoom tool, you'll see you can zoom in. And of course, with the rotate tool, you can rotate. Once I save that and go back to After Effects, you'll see that the text automatically updates. Back in Cinema 4D Lite, there's one other option here, which is the Windows toggle. If you click on it, it will change to 4 panels and you can get different views. And if you click on the toggle over here to the right, it'll go back to what you had. In the next video, we'll take a look at Cineware layers. In this video, we'll head back over to After Effects and look at its integration with Cinema 4D. For this video, I'm going to delete the title Cinema 4D we just created. We won't use it. And instead, I'll go to File, New, and create a Maxon Cinema 4D file. We'll call this Title 2. And instead of creating text with the text tool, I'm going to choose File, Open, and choose the title.ai file. I'll hit OK on the import options, and you'll see that this brings in a bunch of splines for us to work with. Now, you should note that the Illustrator file that I just imported is saved in Adobe Illustrator version 8. The reason for that is because later versions of Illustrator switched from PostScript to PDF formats. So for each one of these splines, I'm going to have to click and hold and put them into an extrude object. This is going to take a while, so I'll fast forward to the end. For each one of these splines, we have to put them in an extrude object. So I select Extrude Object. I'll drag it into my title null right above Path 1. And then I'll drag Path 1 into the Extrude Object. I'll keep doing this for all 28 splines. And now that we have our splines in Extrude Objects, I'm going to come to the Render Settings panel and double check that my width and height is the same as my After Effects project. We can do that by going into After Effects, making sure we're on the main composition, and choose Composition Settings. Here it's 1920 by 1080. So back in Cinema 4D Lite, we'll type in 1920 by 1080. and close it. We'll save the file, File, Save, and we'll name this one Title 2. Let's add a camera to the scene. We'll go to Create, Camera, and choose a target camera. We'll toggle open our 4 views so we can make sure it's positioned properly. And in this top view, I want to zoom in a little bit and move our target, which is the center dot here, in so we can capture artwork a little bit better. I'll move it. I switched over to the target and moved it down. And that's about where we want it. I might move it over just a little bit. Our target can be selected in the Object panel. That looks about right. We'll call this camera 1. Just as a demo, let's go ahead and add another camera so that we can see it in After Effects. And for this one, I can position it anywhere. I'll use the Rotate tool to rotate it up. And we'll call this one Camera 2. We won't use this in our animation. Let's save this. And make sure you see this in your After Effects project. If you don't, you can choose File, Import, File, and select the file. Let's drag it into our composition. And you can see now that it's positioned exactly the way it was in Cinema 4D Lite. The first thing we want to do is, if we want to see our render properly, we would select the renderer and set it to Standard Final. This should clear up your view. To speed up production time, you can always switch it back to software. Below that, we have our project settings, and this is where we can access those cameras we set up. Cinema 4D camera is the default view. I want to select a Cinema 4D camera and set camera. This brings up a dialog box where we can choose which camera we want. I'm going to choose camera 1 and hit OK. And you'll see that my camera view changes. And if you want to set it to the second camera, you can choose Set Camera and do Camera 2. Let's go back to our first camera. In the next video, we'll look at 3D channel effects. In this video, we'll look at depth passes and how you can use them in After Effects. For this next video, we'll use depth passes, or what I like to think of as 3-dimensional masks. Unfortunately, Cinema 4D Lite doesn't allow you to save out files that contain depth pass information, such as an RLA file. You can only do that in the full version of the software. But I'm going to show you both how to use the RLA file format and how to get the same effect in Cinema 4D Lite. Let's start by looking at how to create a depth pass. I'm going to use a demo file for this exercise, so open up the Cube's After Effects project. Right-click on the Cube Cinema 4D layer and choose Open, Edit Original. This is a simple scene I've created for you to play with. To turn on Multipass, we'll go to the Render settings, turn on Multipass, and then use the Multipass button to choose Depth. Close the settings, and if you're in Cinema 4D Lite, go ahead and head back to After Effects. I'm going to go to the full version of Cinema 4D and render out an RLA format. So with the full version of Cinema 4D, I'll click on Render Settings and click on the Save option. You'll notice the difference between Cinema 4D Lite and Cinema 4D is that you do not have the option to save rendered files. I'll click on the More button and save this as cubes in my Chapter 4 folder. I'll make sure that the file format is set to RLA, and I'll close my settings. Finally, I'll click on Render to Picture Viewer to render the image. You'll notice that this image has 2 layers, one with the color image on it, and the other one with the depth, which is depicted by a grayscale image. We'll close the Render Viewer and head back over to After Effects. I'll right-click on my Projects panel and choose File, Import, and choose the Cube's RLA that I just created. With the RLA file selected, you'll see not only do I get millions of colors with the image, I also get the Z-depth information here as well. We're going to open up 3D Channel Effects And now 3D channel effects are special. They only work when a file has depth information, such as an RLA. 3D channel effects don't work with regular footage or compositions. I'm going to drag the fog 3D on top of my RLA, and I'm going to play with the settings here. I'm going to drag the fog start depth to about 1400, and I'll drag the fog end depth a little bit past there. And so what you see with the fog is it's using that depth information, and it makes it look like fog is fading in or out of the background. I'll delete that effect, and let's take a look at the depth of field effect. Same thing here. I'm going to increase my maximum radius to blur my image, and then I'm going to change my focal plane thickness to about 1200. And you'll start to see that the cube in the front is sharper than the cubes in the back. This is what's known as depth of field. In the next video, I'll show you how to do that without the 3D channel effects. In this video, we'll create depth of field without using a 3D channel effect. Back in our main composition, I'm going to duplicate the title Cinema 4D layer. You can do that by choosing Command D or Control D on a PC on your keyboard. And with the duplicated layer, I'm going to hit my Enter key on my keyboard, which allows me to rename it, and I'll call it Depth. With the Depth layer selected, I'm going to turn on Multipass. If this is disabled, make sure that you're on the standard final renderer. I'll click on Set Multipass and change it to Depth. This brings in the depth information from Cinema 4D. Note, I've turned on Multipass in my title Cinema 4D file. Let's now hide the layer for depth. We're just going to use it as a reference, and select the underlying title Cinema 4D layer. To that, I'm going to add a camera lens blur effect, and I'll increase the aspect ratio until I like it. Next, I'll set the blur map layer to our depth layer. And finally, I want to change source to effects and mask. Now we can play with the blur focal distance. And what you'll see is where the depth image was dark, it's blurrier, and where it was bright, it's sharper. In the next section, we'll look at how to add animations.